Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's live stream. Again, we're in the week where the world is starting to just relax the restrictions that are on people. Now, that relaxing's been different in every state and territory, but what we are seeing is the real imminent return of some sort of activity in our community sports clubs. Now, what we've seen this week, talking to lots and lots of clubs and lots of volunteers, is a real sense of enthusiasm and a real sense of let's go, let's get into it. And I think we just need to temper that with the reality that we're in. And the reality is the one thing that we do not want to associate, the one word we do not want associated with any sports club in the country is the word cluster. And we definitely don't want to have the words COVID-19 cluster linked to a sports club. So like we're seeing in Melbourne with the meat packing network and potentially the McDonald's cluster, sports clubs have the real risk to become a cluster if we don't really follow the basics really well. And the basics are social distancing, hygiene, and monitoring the health and well-being of the individuals that we're allowing into our club. And so really excitingly, it's been a great experience for me over the last couple of nights as being part of the Karting Australia rollout of support each night, working with each of their volunteers and state bodies to look at what the reignition means or the restart means for karting clubs. And as we're delving down and getting the feedback, the karting clubs are getting the information, but then they're getting that information, then going, well, what about this scenario? What about this scenario? And the true realization of what social distancing in particular means and how big an impact that it's going to have on sport, but until there's past the levels that we've been disclosed. So at the moment, there's small up to groups of 50, up to groups of 100. So no one's looking beyond that at the moment. So social distancing is going to be with us for up to groups of 100. So that let me just jump onto my slides here. One slide. So the benefit of working with karting and working specifically with the karting clubs is it's starting to identify the practical realities that we're dealing with. And so depending on your state and territory that you live in at the moment, we're allowed small groups to be informally potentially training or playing in a way that allows social distancing. And so size matters. And so when we look at the practical impacts at a club, if we're only allowed 10 people, and that may include, if we're talking about juniors, depending on your state and territory, that may include the parents, that may include accompanying kids coming with the participant as well. If we're only allowing 10 people at any one time into a given area, or 20 people, depending on your state and territory, whatever that number is, but our clubs might be many times more than that. The first challenge that we're going to have is, well, how do we work out who's coming in when? So booking systems, online booking systems, whether it's through your platform that's SportsTG, Try Booking, Eventbrite, online booking systems may be an option there. Really strong scheduling of who can come when. The reality is we're probably going to need to be talking to our clubs about who can't come, right? So we don't want, if we can only have small numbers of participants, we don't want those numbers necessarily taken up with, other people that are just watching, or as they would normally do in clubs, or parents bringing multiple children, etc. We need to make sure that scenario doesn't happen, because clubs, one of the things that came out is coming out of the discussions with the clubs is, we can sneak our way around the rules this way, or we can sneak our way around the rules that way, or we can do this, we can do that. But the reality is the cost of getting this wrong could potentially mean that your club becomes a cluster. right? And that is catastrophic for your club. Like, that's catastrophic. It will lose the faith of the community. It will create all sorts of challenges that we just do not want to face. So we just got to be careful with that. So size matters. How are we going to limit those number of people into what we're allowed to have, whatever that limit is? So then practically, when you think about your venues, that means when they're driving in and parking, right? They can't necessarily park next to each other now because get out of the car and we're funneling them into a walkway, so they're walking into the same venue together. Is people, if we're having, if you like, shifts of people, so 10 to 11, this team comes in, 11 to 12, this team comes in, what happens at the changeover? Are we separating the people so that one group can exit safely before another group comes in? Right? So it's not about trying to rig the numbers or anything like that. This is all about health and safety, right? Right, and creating and really buying into the concept of social distancing. So that starts when we get into the car, when we start to head to the club. Who gets into the car is really important. Who heads to the club, really important. How we get them into the club is really important. And how we get them out safely to their cars is really important. Cleaning and hygiene is one of the basic foundations of moving forward. So what does that mean? Now, I'll go back one. What we're really seeing at the moment is that what the governments are asking is that people come, they participate safely, social distance, and then they go, right? So ideally, or not ideally, in lots of cases, the only indoor facility allowed to be used at the moment is potentially the toilets, right? So how are we going to clean those? Or do we going to clean those after every group have come forward, before every group's come forward? What sort of hand washing facilities are we going to have? We must have hand washing facilities. What's the expectation we're going to put on our participants? Do they bring their own disinfectant, and so they're disinfecting when they come in, and we're seeing them disinfect their hands when they come in and when they leave? Because we've got to be really conscious of the fact that clubs don't necessarily have the money to be able to pay for large amounts of disinfectant, but we need to be disinfecting. We need to be using soapy water. So we need to be thinking about the equipment. So minimize the number of things that are shared. And so obviously the obvious things are drink bottles and towels and rags that wipe your face, or those sorts of things. So we're really putting the onus back onto the individual, right? And so if you want, bring your own drink bottle, bring your own towels, bring your own warm-up mats, bring your own, as much of your own equipment as you can, so we minimize the sharing. And then the equipment that we are sharing, then how are we cleaning it? How are we making sure that it's completely free of any sort of problems from one group to the next? So disinfect before a group uses it. Make sure the group disinfects their hands, washes their hands, and then when that equipment's ready for the next group, we need to disinfect and make sure it's safe. That's a lot of work, and that's a lot of, and in some clubs, that's a lot of equipment. So how are we going to do that in the practical sense? Now, one was toilets only is going to be one of the themes typically. So ideally what we want is we want people coming to our sporting facilities dressed, ready to go, right? And we want them to leave without going inside, ideally without using any of the other facilities, toilets there. Now, one thing that we do need to consider is first aid. So if we're going to have any sporting activity, then one of the things we need to deal with is how do we deal with injuries and those sorts of occurrences that will happen. And you go, well, if we're socially distancing, there's no contact, how could, what sort of injuries are we likely? But most ACL injuries in in the footballs actually don't occur via contact; they occur by twisting and turning. So, for an example, incidental contact, incidental collisions. So, how are you going to handle first aid? So, communications and expectations is really important. So, the way that people are going to come, so people are just assuming because they just haven't thought about it, they're just assuming they're just going to be able to go rock up to the club and do what they normally do with the people that they normally do it. And they're not going to be able to, right? We know that that's the case, and it's going to be quite a dramatic change. And so what we need to be doing, communications is vital in this scenario, because we need to be setting the expectations so people know what it's going to be like coming to the club. So, for instance, the three real strong key themes: social distancing, hygiene, but the other one is monitoring, self-monitoring and monitoring of the health of the people that are coming into your facilities. So making sure that people know that if they've got a cough, a cold, a sniffle, that they don't come in, right? They do not come in. And so if they do, know that they will be sent home, or denied access, right? Now, we don't want to get into a situation where someone's come and then get told to go home and they don't know, they haven't been told that this could be a reality. So we want to take the conflict out of it. We want to take the confusion out of it. But most of all, we want to be safe, and we want to make sure people are clear. If you've got a cough, a cold, a sniffle, like Josh Feinberg, you started coughing just out of the blue. I've been doing a lot of it because I've been doing a lot of webinars. So I actually yesterday, my whole family and I went and did a COVID-19 test just to make sure that coughing and stuff is due to just heavy workload on voice, for instance, before we start to kind of push ourselves or allow ourselves to go out into the community, or potentially people come into our house. So as we're working down into what all of this means by club level, it's actually significant. It's not as easy as hey, let's go and run a training session. It's not that easy. It's going to take a lot of thinking. It's going to take a lot of planning. And this is why organisations like in Victoria, Football, AFL Victoria, Football Federation of Victoria is saying, hey, hold on. Clubs are not yet allowed to do sanctioned training because they're just going through all the legislation, all the requirements, and looking at what it means practically in a sporting body concept, and right down to this practical level that we're talking about. And so that's really, really, I really respect the peak bodies for just holding back the enthusiasm and doing that. So we're seeing peak bodies now start to release their COVID strategies moving forward. So Emma, hi Emma, I was actually just talking about whether some of the Cricket Victoria scenarios just before, but have you seen any clear guidelines and checklists from clubs as yet, or an ETA on when these will be available? Well, I guess what we're seeing, well, in fairness, if we just look at each state and territory, the guidelines are only just coming out. Like, so Victoria's came out on Tuesday, for instance. So and each state and territory is significantly different. And so the peak sporting bodies are just absorbing that. So we're certainly seeing, so sports like Karting Australia, they have released their roadmap out early. They were always going to be one of the sporting ones to go early because their sport is naturally socially isolated, a bit like golf, a bit like tennis. So there's certainly information coming out from the peak sporting bodies, but I would expect over the next couple of weeks that we'll see sport-specific information. But Emma, I refer you back to the Australian Institute of Sport document or framework for rebooting sport in a COVID-19 environment that came out Friday a week ago. So just Google AIS COVID-19 framework, and that gives you a really good high-level sort of framework, and then you can be applying that to your club in anticipation that the peak bodies will come through. I've seen a lot of official rules, but no real how-tos for clubs. And in the defence of the peak body, the legislation only came out in some cases. In Victoria, it was Tuesday after Daniel Andrews' announcement on the Monday. So it's really too early to kind of for people to be, they're just absorbing it and working through. And it's different in each state and territory. So it makes it quite challenging for national peak bodies because it's different in every jurisdiction. Different but the same. And that's creating some real challenges. But having been working with Karting Australia, I would expect to see significant how-tos, checklists, and those sorts of things come out in the next 5 to 7 days, because clubs are champing at the bit to get out there. Hoping no follow-ups from Sport and Rec Victoria to include this, but haven't had confirmation. Yeah, and Emma, this is a scenario where you can't get in front of the game. In absolute fairness to the peak sporting bodies, you cannot get in front of the game because we don't know what the reality is that we're allowed to operate. And once we understand that, then we don't know, then we need to take a little bit of time and absorb what that means for at club level. And I genuinely loved being involved in the Karting Australia rollout with their clubs because last night we had 60 or 70 or 80 or 90 people on from Karting New South Wales and Victorian clubs, and there was 60 questions on minute detail of practicalities in clubland, and it won't be until we have those conversations that we can start to create those checklists. And so after each of the sessions, Karting Australia is adjusting their resources, creating frequently asked questions, etc. But we're just sitting in these sessions going, wow, that didn't think of that. We didn't think of that. We didn't think of that, and those sorts of things. Stacey, we won't do the checklist. What we'll do is we'll link to, there's lots of checklists being made by lots of great authorities. So what we'll do is we'll start to get those checklists out. And so we see our role more as letting people know about the resources being available and then pushing them out to you, and so that we can use them. So as we see them next week, we'll highlight them in the live stream. And then start to ask, like you guys are doing, you can be asking your questions to me, and we can start to get down to that granular detail, because it's the granular detail that's going to decide whether we transmit in our club or not. Right? And that's the monumental thing that's just huge. Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for sharing it with the Casey Netball committee. So, yeah, I guess that's where I wanted to go today. I've really loved being involved in the Karting Australia discussions with their clubs, and as we get more practical information, we'll keep pushing that out as fast as we can. So if you can share this, and again, Rebecca being at an association level, Stacey being at a national body level, Emma at a state body level, if you guys can be sharing this information and letting other people know about these live streams, then that means we'll be getting information back, which we can share out very quickly, and we can start just keep communicating with each other and take ourselves through the process. So really loved the interaction today, guys. Yeah, it's been fantastic. We'll keep pushing this information as we get it. Please keep telling me if you see stuff, and we'll highlight it. And I look forward to next week as we work our way out. But the key to working our way out safely, even though it's really key to working our way out, even though it's really exciting, is to be able to do it safely, because we just do not want the word cluster next to any one of our clubs anywhere in the country. So until tomorrow, which, as you will know, is Esport Friday, very much looking forward to the journey that Cameron's going to take us on. I've actually learned a lot, and it's opened our eyes to a lot. So until until tomorrow, stay safe, enjoy the sport, and enjoy the kind of the slight easing of restrictions. So I'm Steve Pallas. Thank you so much for being part of our sports community. Bad technique. Shouldn't put my mouse so far away that I can't find it. All right. So until tomorrow, see you all. Stay safe.